Good afternoon, and your name is?
My name is Iantha Gantt Wright.
And what do you do?
I'm an independent consultant. I do a lot of work with environmental and conservation organizations on diversity and multiculturalism.
Okay.
And actually, it broadens, my work actually has broadened out past the kind of the environmental community to other communities also, because people are always looking for consultants, especially to help them identify how to become better organizations. So that's what I do.
Okay. And so when you started out working with the Park Service and other places like that to bring more diversity into their ranks. Is that correct?
That's correct, but when I originally started in Baltimore at a place called Clean Water Action, and I didn't have that connection at all myself at that point. But after a time, I was able to kind of move over to an organization called the National Parks Conservation Association, where I ran their diversity program.
Okay, and so in that, were you working in D.C.? Or out of that grew your work with the D.C.?
I worked in D.C. I also worked over in Baltimore. And again, spent some time down in Texas and a couple of other places working on the issues.
Well, for a moment, can we zero in on your work in the district? Did you work east of the river or around that area? We're very interested in finding out more about the interaction and relationships around the Anacostia River and east of D.C. And the environment and the communities there and how the environment impacts them.
So, yeah, I have done some work in east of the river. And that work was when I was with the National Parks Conservation Association. And a lot of that was really, attempting to find ways to create more opportunities for folks who are east of the river and in other places. And to kind of get folks to the place that we have an understanding of, that we are in a country where we literally have something that's called the National Park Service, and we have these national parks all around the country, and part of my work has been to find more ways to create more opportunities for people from all communities, east of the river, out here in Fort Washington, all that, to be able to engage more with these amazing places that, we wake up and we breathe every day because we have trees. So yeah, creating opportunities for all of us to kind of understand and value that stuff.
Okay, and can you give us an example of some of the opportunities that were created, some of the programs, and how doing this impacts this local community?
Some of the programs that I've been engaged in have been programs. For instance, I did some work with the Chesapeake Bay Trust. What the Chesapeake Bay Trust came to me and they said, what we want to do is we want to make sure that people from diverse communities have a connection or realize that these places are their places too. And so what I did for the trust was a whole series of listening sessions. And it took us about 6 months to do it. But we did listening sessions in Montgomery County, we did them in Prince George's County, we did them in some smaller communities, and our minds were totally blown. I mean, our minds were totally blown, and the folks in the community's minds were totally blown. Because so many people didn't realize that they had these amazing places that they could actually, find solace in, or whatever. So it's been for me a real exciting and wonderful journey.
How did you come to this, knowing that this is something that you became so passionate for you? Was it your connection to the earth? Was it a grandmother, great-grandmother, your mother, aunt, somebody in the family, someone that was connected and inspired you?
What inspired me was where I grew up. And like I mentioned, I grew up in Baltimore City. There was a place like our house was not far, if anybody knows anything about Baltimore City, or like the Liberty Heights area. And not right around, maybe about 5 blocks away from where we lived was this place that we as kids called the 50s. Basically, it was a little hill, but it had a stream that ran through it. And so what we would do was we'd actually put on our clothes, we put on our tennis shoes and we'd run around and we'd go down in the 50s, because the 50s was the place where we had fun. The other thing was in our backyard, again, we had huge trees. And right behind the trees was another kind of it's like I said, we thought it was a mountain, but it was a hill that we could climb up. And I would get up and I'd climb up the tree and then I'd jump back down and then I'd go up the hill. And that for me was so much fun. So we had these connections to the outdoors. And it wasn't the whole blossomy thing of the national parks and all that kind of, it was like just right here in my backyard. I can go outside and I can see this huge tree and I can climb it anytime I want to. And then I could just run around the other side and go down to the 50s and hang out in the 50s. So that is, that's what really inspired me. And again, my great aunt, who just was so amazing and used to plant stuff all the time. So for her, it was about, it's not just us, but it's also the trees and the birds and all the other stuff and the flowers. And, when you make that connection, then you're making the connection to something bigger than you, Iantha. You're making the connection to God, or whatever we call it, spirit, life, energy. And so that's how I got to this place and why I love what I do every day of my life. I mean, I get teary-eyed about it.
How do you involve other women? How do you inspire other women to be more connected to, with all their busy lives? How do you bring them back to the fundamentals of the earth and the environmental movement and how important this is?
For me, it's through conversation. It's through the sharing of my own experiences. And then it's also creating opportunities and possibilities for women and girls to be in those places. You see what I mean? Because the thing is that you as much as I can say, I feel the greatness right here with this pool in the backyard and all these big trees. When I went out to the Grand Canyon, this does nothing. I love it, you see what I mean? However, being in the Grand Canyon, this amazing place that simply God created through the life of whatever you call spirit or God, whatever you call it, that we have this place called the Grand Canyon. And it's beautiful. And it just sits there in its majesty. Oh, I'm sorry. It just sits there in its majesty. And our responsibility is simply to allow it to be and to enjoy the fact that whatever it is you call it, spirit, God, energy, life, whatever it is, decided that a Grand Canyon would be here, and that we as human beings would always be connected to it. Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think all that goes back, when you think about history, it goes all the way back through history. That, we were seen as, women don't do that kind of thing. We don't, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And as times have changed and people have changed, what I think many women now have begun to understand, it's like, this is not just for guys. This is for me too. And again, when you go somewhere, I'm going to say Bryce Canyon this time, where you go somewhere, and where you're able and see, and you kind of go, wow, this cannot just be for one group of people. This has to be here for all of us. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
And for me is with that comes the conversation around our responsibility. because they're also our responsibility. If whatever you call it decided that we were going to have a Grand Canyon and a Bryce Canyon and the Smoky Mountains and all these other beautiful places, there's a purpose for that. And we as women and girls, whatever, are required to make sure that they are there for the next generation. For the next generation. I would never, after I've, I've gone through all these places and I look at my great nieces and nephews now, and what I think to myself all the time is, I will work my butt off, my life off, to make sure that they will get to see a Grand Canyon in their lifetime, that they will get to see a great Smoky Mountains in their lifetime, that this is theirs also.
We've talked about the spiritual aspects of your journey. Can you now relate for us how the health piece, how that has evolved for you and how that impacts us?
Yeah, that is, I think actually it's absolutely critical. The health piece here for me is not so much about physical health as it is about mental health. Physical health, yes, when it comes to, I go out to the Grand Canyon and I get to climb the mountain, but I can't be at the canyon all the time. And so for me, there is also this piece around my mental health, which allows me to stay in the space of understanding my physical health. The mental health and how these places show up for me is I have a beautiful booklet inside my house that has some amazing pictures of the Grand Canyon and of other places that I've been to or I have not been to. And I can tell you there are moments where my life feels like I am losing everything. And I will turn around and I automatically think to myself of the greatness of the places, the beauty of the outside, the beauty of the my own backyard with these huge trees, that I have the ability to walk out here and get into a pool. It shifts my whole thought process if I'm moving into a place which is taking me somewhere I don't want to go. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And so for me, my life basically, to some large degree, centers around the ability to come outside and look at my trees, or go out into the pool, or to go take a drive and just ride down, into one of our parks. Piscataway Park is right up the street, and I love it. So that, for me, as an African American woman and a woman in the United States and living here in the Maryland area, is just it's critical. It's critical. I can't imagine my life without these trees. You see what I mean? It's like, I just can't imagine it. And again, it goes all the way back to when I was a kid, Somebody taught me that trees and birds and flowers and all those beautiful things will keep you here much longer than if you don't engage in them. And so anyhow, I don't know what else to say.
And that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I love that whole thing, because now, in an age when electronics have taken over
Yes.
our children's lives and our lives, the need to be back in nature is fundamental to our survival. And I think
Yes.
that's exactly right, what you've just said. And
Yeah.
thank you so much.
No problem, no problem. Leave those things home when you go to the park. Enjoy. But thank you all so very much. This is, yeah.